So, like always, appreciate everybody coming out, either here in person or online, covering Penn State football. Appreciate that. I want to start by encouraging and thanking the fans from last week for how they showed up and supported. I'd like to start by encouraging them to do the same thing this week. It's going to be important that we have a significant home field advantage. I'd also like to send my thoughts to the family of former PSU linebacker Bonnie Beju. Obviously, that was traumatic news to find out that we lost Bonnie, and I send on behalf of our entire football family and university our thoughts and prayers. Kind of reviewing the previous game, when you talk about kind of the stats that we talk about every single week, the turnover battle, we were even. The penalty battle, we won, and to me, this was significant. There was a bunch of this, and I don't feel like it was talked about a whole lot, but Minnesota entered the game #1 nationally in fewest penalties. So winning that was important, and again, that'd be another kind of opportunity to reinforce the impact that the fans had on the game, especially when you're playing an offense that is designed to stay on schedule. I think that had a major factor in the game. Drive start battle, we lost by 1 yard. The sack battle, we won that. The explosive play battle, our offense was at 22%, so we won that on offense. We missed our goal on defense. And then specifics, players of the game on offense, we had quarterback Sean Clifford. Clifford was also the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. On defense, winner was Curtis Jacobs, linebacker. On special teams, linebacker Dominic DeLuca. The D-Squad Players of the Week, Ben Hartman, offensive lineman. And then, I know these are a lot of names, but our coaches really felt that our scout wide receivers really did a good job and prepared us. That's Jan Mollert, Jason Estrella, Anthony Ivy, Jake Spencer, Mason Stahl, Tyler Johnson, Caden Saunders, Patrick Williams, and Robert Rossi all did a tremendous job, and I tried to talk them out of listing so many guys, but they felt strongly about it. Defensively, Devon Townley and Christian Driver. And then on special teams, Jason Estrella. So that's kind of reviewing some of the game. The last few points I would say is I just was very pleased with the entire organization and how we responded, players, staff, coaches. I thought P.J. Mustipher's leadership and vocal presence all week long in meetings and practice, I think was really important, and I thought he made a huge impact. I thought we played fast and aggressive. You watched on tape, we were back to playing fast and aggressive. And then a couple other things, again, that I don't know if this was covered much with the media or not. But Minnesota's offense on third down was ranked #1 nationally at 66%. We held them to 15%, 2 of 13. That was huge. We talked about getting off the field on defense on third down and staying on the field on offense. And then Minnesota's defense was also ranked #1 in the country nationally, holding other offenses to 22%. And we were 46% on the day. And then Dom DeLuca's block punt was a big play. Just a few opportunities I mentioned for growth. Got to get rid of the pre-snap and post-snap penalties. We had 2 pre-snap, a false start, and a defensive offside, so very similar penalties. And then we had an unsportsmanlike conduct post-whistle. So those were the big things. And then probably the last thing is we got to start fast on offense. That's in practice, that's in jog throughs, and then obviously that's in games. When you talk about Ohio State and Ryan Day, obviously a ton of respect for what they've been able to do for a long time. They've been doing it for a long time at Ohio State. But a ton of respect for them and what they do and how they go about their business. offensive coordinator Ryan Day / Kevin Wilson. Obviously, they do a great job. Got a ton of weapons. Some people are saying their quarterback is leading, the Heisman votes at this stage. But they're challenging not only through scheme, but also the weapons they have. The quarterback, C.J. Stroud, wide receiver, Marvin Harrison, the other wide receiver, Emeka Buku, who can mention a number of guys, running back Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and then they got an offensive lineman, a number of offensive linemen, but the one guy that jumps out is DeJuan Jones, who we recruited as well. He's 6'8", 359 pounds, and very light on his feet, which is kind of crazy to say. Defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, who we know very well. Jim actually came and visited us here years ago. I think he was at Duke at the time. Has done a really good job going in there and being aggressive. In terms of scheme, taking advantage of their personnel. You look at Ronnie Hickman, who we recruited heavily out of New Jersey. Seems like he's been playing there forever. Teron Vincent, who we know out of Baltimore. Tommy Eichenberg, the linebacker. JT Tuiamola, I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. And then Denzel Burke, the corner. So they got guys at really each level of the defense. And then on special teams coordinator Parker Fleming has done a nice job. They play a ton of guys, starters on special teams. They always have. And if you look, their punter is an Australian punter, does a really good job. That's something we're going to have to be prepared for, is the variety of kicks that a lot of these Australian punters are able to do in terms of spreading the ball all over the field. And then their punt returner, Emeka Buku, again, who we mentioned earlier. So a lot of information, a lot of things that we need to get worked on. Obviously, today's our first real day of practice. We did have Sunday. Monday's our off day from a planning perspective, and then today. So we'll have a better idea later in the week, but that's a start. So open up the questions.
Rich Scarcella, Reading Eagle, and then Mark Wigenrich.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you, man?
I'm good, thanks. What did you see from your team during practice last week, and can a performance like Saturday's build momentum going into a week like this?
Yeah, I think so, and it needs to, right? We're playing a really good opponent at home. We did some really good things to build on last week that we should have confidence from and momentum from, and we need to build on it. We need to get better today in practice. We need to get better all week in terms of our preparation and how we practice, and how we coach, and then the same thing, with the game on Saturday. We're going to have to play better this Saturday than we did this past week. So, I think there's a ton of stuff to build on from last week. There's a bunch of stuff watching that tape to be excited about and to show the team, and we got to build on it for sure.
Mark Wigenrich, all Penn State, and Frank Bodani.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mark?
Good, thanks. 2018, after that 2018 Ohio State game, you outlined the steps that Penn State had to take to become elite. Where are you on that timeline right now?
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of things have changed since then. I think obviously we talked a lot this offseason about, new president in Dr. Bendapudi and new athletic director in Pat Kraft. That factors into all of this. There's no doubt about it. I think there's things within our program that you look at, whether it's from a development standpoint, whether it's a facility standpoint, whether it's a nutrition standpoint, whether it's recruiting, all the things that you talk about in terms of building a program. I think some areas we have made significant progress in, and others we still have work to do. So I think in a lot of ways we've taken some steps in the right direction, but there's still some areas that we need to get resolved. And that's why I think I've voiced this over and over again, the excitement I have for the leadership that we have in those two positions, and that's with total respect and appreciation for the past as well.
Frank Bodani, York Daily Record, and Mike Gross.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Good, how are you?
Real good. Could you evaluate your pass rush so far overall? Are you coming up short at all in any part of that? And if so, how do you think that can get better as we go?
Yeah, I think it really kind of depends. I think things can skew that, or if you're just looking at stats and not necessarily basing it off the film, I think things can skew that. If you're playing a team that's going to run the ball 90% of the time, and how they are built and how they are wired, that's going to impact your stats. You play somebody who's going to throw it every single down, that's going to impact your stats as well. So I think overall, I think our ability to affect the quarterback, whether it's through sacks, pressures, or tight coverage, has been good. I think you look at our completion percentage against our defense, that is not just because of our defensive backs. That's also because of pressure and making the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket. So would we like more flat-out sacks? Yes. Would we like more tackles for a loss? Yes. But overall, I think when you evaluate the whole picture, pretty good.
Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers, and then Donnie Collins.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Mike. How are you, man?
I'm good, thanks. When you mentioned that Sean was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, that there was sort of a long pause there, and
I think that may have just been your Wi-Fi.
Is this the backup quarterback is always popular with the fans? That's sort of a football cliche. Is there anything about this situation that's a little different to the fans? Some reason, whether this is unique to Penn State, why they maybe don't appreciate Sean as much as you do?
Yeah, I'm spending my energy, all of my energy, on getting ready to play a really good Ohio State team. I'm pouring all my energy into loving and supporting my players and staff, and focusing on things that I can control and impact. That's where all my energy is focused on, is supporting my staff, supporting and loving the players, and focusing on getting ready for a really good Ohio State team on offense, defense, and special teams, and those other things I'm not spending any time on, because to be honest with you, unless you have something for me or somebody else, I don't see how I can impact that.
Donnie Collins, Scranton Times-Tribune, then Corey Geiger.
Peter, James.
Hey Donnie, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Parker.
What does your shirt say? Oh, the Blues.
Parker said after the game that you guys that he felt that the offense runs its best when it's in its tempo, when it's doing good work in a tempo offense. And what are some of the things that kind of lead to that for you guys? Lead to you kind of having success there? Some of the outside ingredients outside of just getting the play in fast and snapping quick. Yeah, I think when we're in a rhythm, whether it's in games or whether we're in a rhythm in practice going against our defense, we've had a ton of conversation about that, and specifically with Sean and the receivers about it. They feel strongly about that, but there's also a fine line, right? If you go fast and you go 3 and out, then it puts your defense in a more challenging position as well. So there's a balance of that. I thought one of the things that we did best on Saturday was just mixing tempo, mixing cadence, mixing scheme, whether it's move the pocket, whether it's run, whether it's play action pass, whether it's misdirection, whether it's
trick plays. I thought we had a really good mix of keeping them kind of off balance and uncomfortable. And the funny thing is, what I try to say all the time is, say you tweak a run scheme, a counter, or say you run a reverse. We ran a reverse and we got 6 yards, but to me, there's a lot more impact than just the 6 yards. It's like if you run a reverse, people aren't happy with a 6-yard play because you're thinking you're running a reverse for an explosive play. But 6 yards is a pretty good average. But the other thing it does, it gives the coordinator something to be concerned about, and it gives the defenders, specifically the linebackers, and when you're playing a team like Minnesota, who they're a quarters team and the safeties are really involved in the run support, it gives those guys pause, whether it's reverses, play action pass. So now when you go back to your normal runs, they're not fitting it the same way, with the same confidence and speed as they would without those plays being run. So I think there's a ton of value in that, and to me, that's what we did best on Saturday, and we need to continue to do.
Corey Geiger, DK Pittsburgh Sports, and then Johnny McGonigal.
James, this is kind of a long-winded question about roster construction.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
You've always competed well against Ohio State, and they're kind of the team at the top, so you got to do things to compete well against them. You'd said earlier, if you play a team that runs 90%, the stats will be different. I'm just curious, how much concerted effort over the years has been, hey, we got to do what Ohio State does. We got to be able to stop it. But then if you play other teams, maybe like a Michigan that runs more, is your roster always set up for every other kind of team? How difficult is that when you're constructing a roster?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And I think that's one of the things that maybe frustrates people, and I'm not talking specific to Penn State, I'm saying in general, there are certain weeks where you feel like you match up better, whether it's scheme, or there's certain weeks whether you match up, whether it's personnel, better than other weeks. There's no doubt about that. You may have an injury at a position or two, and that position is where their strength is. There's a lot of things that factor into it. But to your point, that's the challenge, right? You got to be able to, you got to be able to feel like you can line up and match up from a skill and athleticism perspective with an Ohio State 1 week, and then say you make it to the Big Ten championship like we did, and you play Wisconsin. That's a very different animal that you're getting ready for, and you have to either have the depth and the diversity within your personnel to do it. I think you guys remember, in the past we would have Kevin Gibbons playing D tackle, and then we may play Wisconsin or someone like that and play Kevin that week at defensive end to get bigger, So either having the personnel to be able to make some moves like that, or obviously some scheme things that you're going to have to do different to put your players in the best position to be successful. No different than these teams that play from a 4-2-5 shell. They're playing with a nickel almost predominantly on the field, and then you go play, a team that's going to try to play smash mouth football, and you've never played with a 3 linebacker on the field. Like I know that was a big discussion Saturday as we had those 3 linebackers on the field. Well, that made a ton of sense against Minnesota and what they do. So I think your point is a really good one, and that's one of the complexities or the subtle things that's challenging, especially in a conference like the Big Ten, where maybe you have a little bit maybe more diversity in how people are built throughout our conference, where a lot of conferences, pretty much everybody's running a similar style throughout the entire conference. So I think that's a good question, and I think it's a fair one, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to build a team that can do both, which is easier said than done.
Johnny McGonigal, Penn Live, then we'll come here in the room.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, John. How are you, man?
Good. Given what you have with Joey, Caitlin, Johnny, everyone in that secondary most confident you felt in a secondary going into a matchup with Ohio State, who's historically in your tenure has had a really good quarterbacks, wide receivers, and a good passing game?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because I haven't really kind of thought about it, but I think your point is that, maybe you could make the argument the strength of our defense, is in the secondary if you were ranking, kind of all three levels. That's a strength of ours for sure. We have a lot of confidence in those guys and we're going to need it. But I also know that these guys are talented enough up front and at tight end and at running back that, if you put too much of an emphasis on that, they can beat you the other way too by running the ball. So they do a good job of being balanced. I think at the end of the day, their trigger man, is what makes them go. He's the one that distributes the ball to all those different playmakers and does a really good job doing it. He throws on the run as well as he throws from the pocket, which is somewhat unusual. Again, he's leading the Heisman race for a reason. So, talented guy that we got a ton of respect for.
Mark?
Hey, James.
How are we doing?
I'm doing great. A year and a half ago, not even, when Katron and Nick committed to Penn State, you guys had a loaded running back room with guys who had significant eligibility remaining. What did it say about them to be willing to join that room? And how fortunate do you feel now that you took two kids when you look out in the game last week and they're your only two healthy scholarship running backs? Thanks.
Yeah, to be honest with you, that's really how, we want to be at every position. We want to not only have the depth and talent to compete week in and week out, but we also want to recruit guys that aren't scared, based on the room that they're coming into, that they're choosing Penn State because of the academics and the campus and the environment and the culture, and they say, look, I'm gonna come to Penn State and I'm gonna compete. And if I plan on playing at the next level, that's gonna prepare me for that and get me used to that. Yeah, I think that was a factor for sure. I loved how those guys approached it. It never really, impacted them. But to be honest with you, the schools that they were being recruited by, it was pretty much similar at all those places. So that kind of takes it out of the equation for the most part.
In the back end?
Coach, you kind of already touched a little bit on this one, Abdul starting on Saturday. Is that a lineup that you think is more long-term legs, or is this continue to be a week-to-week decision?
Yeah, to your point, I think I kind of said that. It really depends on who you play. If you look around college football and the NFL, most people are not playing with three linebackers on the field because they're in 10 or 11 personnel, and now, okay, it's great to have a linebacker that's really good at stopping the run, but now he's not being asked to stop the run, he's being asked to cover Parker Washington out in space. So it's all based on what we need to do to not only get our best players on the field, but also our best players in the field based on the matchup and the scheme and the personnel that we're playing.
Tyler?
James, you needed to do some mixing and matching on the offensive line on Saturday with some guys coming to the sidelines and guys not available. I'm curious what you felt you learned about that unit over the course of those 4 quarters, and specifically a couple guys who had to step up in Vega and then Bryce.
Yeah, Bryce, I think you guys know, we love Bryce. We view Bryce as a starter for us. He's getting really starter reps. If you look at it between him and the guys that are playing on Saturday, he's getting starter type reps. So we're very impressed with him, and he's playing both tackle and guard at a high level. And then also when we get into the heavy sets, he's able to get in there at tight ends. He's doing a lot of things and doing a lot of things well for us. Vega, obviously that situation, that's not something that probably we anticipated going into the game, but it played out that way. He's a guy that we got, there's a lot of excitement in our building about. He's got an awesome way about him. He's always got a smile on his face. I had a freshman check-in meeting with all the offensive players yesterday in my office, and he was walking out and kind of dapped me up on the way out and was just talking about how awesome Saturday was. He's just one of those kids. He's super appreciative of being at Penn State. He's very coachable. Powerful, strong, athletic. We think he's got a really bright future. We'd like to try to redshirt him if we can, but we may not be able to. And he's also, again, you know, you don't say this very often, but he's strong, powerful, and he's extremely light on his feet. And he's 340 pounds and looks like he's 315, you know, and those guys, I think are really important to have up front with some of the matchups that we have. Back to kind of some of the questions I've gotten. You know, you play a team that's maybe undersized and athletic compared to a team that's massive. You know, having those interchangeable parts are important, and having somebody with that type of girth and intelligence and power to match up inside is really valuable. And you know, he's one of these guys, he's not trying to be 340. You know, he's just naturally, that's kind of who he is. And I think we've all seen over the years the guys that are, you know, trying to be something that really their genetics tell them they're not supposed to be. Either they're trying to stay smaller and their body's trying to get bigger and they don't want to embrace that, or vice versa.
Ron?
Obviously, you want to have turnovers in any game.
How you doing?
Pretty good, how are you?
Good.
Obviously, you don't want to have turnovers in any game, but Ohio State had 6 turnovers last week they capitalized on, and then last year you guys had that scoop and score you lost to them. So in big games like this, how much more important is avoiding turnovers?
No, I think turnovers are important every single week. It's one of the most important stats in football, that and explosive plays. I think to your point, you know, obviously the bigger the game that, you know, people, you know, talk about, the bigger the game, then those stats are magnified. Explosive plays are magnified. Turnovers are magnified because the margin of error is smaller in those types of games. So it's always important, but obviously it's magnified in games like this.
Summer?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing good. You talked a little bit about roster construction and everything. How much value added is a defensive coordinator like Manny Diaz in a matchup like this, where you're going to be aggressive, you're going to be chasing the ball, and it's just going to be available more because it's going to be in the air?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to make sure I'm understanding where you're coming from with this question.
Yeah, just sort of what is the value added of his mentality, like the aggressiveness and attacking the ball, trying to force more turnovers rather than maybe sitting back, playing coverage, being comfortable sort of in a complacent situation?
Yeah, I guess I don't view it the way you're communicating it. I mean, you look at Iowa, you could say Iowa is a team that plays the way you just described, and they've played as good a football as anybody in the country and created as many turnovers as anybody in the country. So it really just kind of depends on your style and what you like in terms of how it is built and how it is called. But to your point, obviously we're challenging routes more, you know, in terms of the balls that are, you know, getting broken up, hopefully forcing the quarterback to hold on to the ball longer. So in theory, we should be able to be more disruptive on the quarterback with sacks and pressures and things like that. So it really just depends. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of ways to be successful, whether it's on offense, defense, or special teams. You know, we've done it both ways and been successful both ways, so you can make arguments, but it really just comes down to, you know, probably preference. I prefer good defense, good offense, and good special teams, and however you get to it, you get to it. That could be based on the coordinator's approach and mentality. It also has to factor in your personnel, because there may be a year that our personnel is more suited for this or for that. You have to be able to, you know, have some flexibility within your system to tweak it. You know, but at the end of the day, what's great is the way Manny wants to play, and the way we want to play really matches up with our personnel, you know, right now. So that helps.
Ben?
James, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I've never seen you from this side of the room before, so I just wanted to...
These are over there, right?
I wanted to try something different. Sean was talking this morning about how weeks like this are the sorts of things that can change your season. And as much as we want to know everything every week, there's an inevitability that we all understand that. How do you reconcile the emotions of benchmarking games with the success you can have the rest of the season around them, and sort of, on the one hand, if I look at your schedule, there are a lot of wins still to be had. If someone else is being more critical of it, says, well, maybe they don't beat Michigan, and who knows what happens this weekend, how do you kind of balance the emotions internally that come with those two different kinds of games?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where our process, we lean into so much, because that's the challenge, right? Everybody's being told from every different source, whether it's friends or family members or social media or sending the players into a press conference, the type of questions they get, they're constantly being told, whether it's directly or indirectly, what's a big game, what's not, what's a good win, what's not. And we just try to avoid that as much as we possibly can, and stay consistent with how we go about things, because that can have a huge impact. That can have a huge impact on you making certain games too big based on what you're being told, or overlooking someone else. So we just try to lean into that process as much as we possibly can. Now that doesn't mean it's like we're putting our head in the sand and we don't recognize. Like, we recognize, the players recognize, we talk about it, they know what it is. So it's not like, it's not like we're sitting here trying to, it's not like we're trying to deceive them, try to send them on a path that is not as real and accurate. Okay, let's recognize what it is, and then let's get back to our process and what we need to do to be successful. And over my time, both as a player and as an assistant, as a coordinator, as a head coach, I feel like that's been the best process. And I think it's magnified. I think we've talked about this before. I think it's magnified in today's college football. Specifically the way that playoffs are structured, and at a place like Penn State, it's different. So those things I think are really important.
Bob?
Hey James, how are you?
Good, Bob. How are you, man?
I'm good. You referenced C.J. Stroud as the trigger man of the offense, obviously, and he's 70% completion, arm strength, all that stuff, release. How challenging on the practice field this week will it be to try and even replicate for your secondary and your linebackers what he can do, just to kind of get them up to speed, what to expect on Saturday night?
Yeah, I don't think you really can. I mean, obviously we do that. Like when we build the scout teams each week, you're literally saying, okay, this guy should play him and this guy should play him. But, there's not too many people in the country, that have a quarterback like that, let alone a quarterback like that on the scout team. So that's hard to pull off, and that's where trying to replicate it as much as you possibly can in practice, but then also doing some of the good work every single day so they are getting the speed of it. That's helpful too, but there's no way to completely replicate it week in and week out.
T. Frank?
Hey James, over here.
Hey, T.
I want to get your opinion on the phrase "establish the run." It is it's been in football for as long as football's been around. Analytics have challenged the notion of that, and I just want to get your idea of maybe where you started and if your thoughts on that have changed over time.
Well, I don't know if I've ever kind of approached it or looked at it as establish the run. I've always believed, and I think I've said this in here multiple times too, in balance, but then I've also kind of described balance differently than maybe a lot of people do, and balance doesn't mean you're going to run the ball 50% of the time and throw the ball 50% of the time. It means you have the ability to, in most situations, be able to run or pass, effectively. That's to me the important thing. And then that puts you in position to set up set up the play action passes and things like that. So I've never really talked about kind of that as being a philosophy of ours. It's been more about having enough balance and having enough diversity within our offense that we can do either and be able to play a style that we have to with whatever the game dictates to win. There's been years where we've been really explosive, but we couldn't run the ball when we needed to in 4-minute offense. And that's the hard part, right? You know, the best ones, the elite ones, are able to do all of it. They're able to run when everybody in the stadium knows you're going to run, and be able to throw when you need to throw to win. So that's kind of how I've always looked at it, more than necessarily establishing.
Last two questions, Neil, and then Audrey.
Neil?
Hey, James. I know I have tunnel vision, but did you see the comment or hear about the comment that Harbaugh made yesterday about you, and do you have any reaction to it?
No, I don't.
Audrey?
No, I don't know. Ohio State.
Guess that was it, Neil. That was it.
Did you see it, Audrey?
I wanted to go back to what Mark asked you about.
Just so you know, I was saying no, I don't have any comment.
Right.
To the 365-day a year competition, and you said the comment in the offseason that the more yeses you get in those things, the more you tend to see it on Saturdays.
The more wins is probably a better way to say it.
Yeah. And when you kind of look at that, if you had a wish list of things that you would want to, what's at the top of that list in terms of facilities right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about, I think you guys asked me some of these things last week as well. I think Ben may have asked me something similar. I said I'm more than happy to talk about, you know, those things in the off season. Most of them, you know, I mean, you've heard them enough, and you've heard them before. But again, you know, right now that does not help us or help our players, you know, beat Ohio State on Saturday. We're not going to solve those problems before Saturday. So,
Thank you, Coach.
thanks.
Thank you.